The end of December 2019, Lyda district, Grodno region, Belarus. The frost has made the ground as hard as stone, and no one really wants to go outside, but Yuri Nevedomskiy and his friend Gennady Kudlo have no choice. They have an important task to do, and preferably in such a way that no one sees them. They are walking across a snow-covered field, moving away from the agro town of Tarnova. 36-year-old Nevedomskiy and 48-year-old Gennady. Nevedomskiy has a dark, heavy, elongated plastic bag on his shoulder. The object inside is hard and keeps hitting the man's back. Nevedomskiy walks quickly, hunched over, not looking around. Gennady, on the other hand, keeps looking around and is clearly nervous. He's carrying 2 shovels in his hands. Fortunately, there's no one here to ask why he needs them. The men are already separated from the village by several kilometers, and there's not a soul around, just an empty field and occasional strips of shrubbery. Finally, a dark line of a drainage canal appears ahead. They have arrived. Nevedomskiy stops and takes the sack off his shoulder. It hits the ground with a dull thud. "We'll bury it here," he says hoarsely. "They definitely won't find it?" Gennady doesn't answer. He looks at the bag and it's like he can't take his eyes off it. He knows exactly what's inside. A woman's body, torso, limbs and head. He helped to cut it up himself a couple of days ago. And just a little earlier, he poured vodka for the owner of this body and wished her a happy new year. Nausea rises in his throat. Gennady takes a step back, but he is stopped by Nevedomskiy's piercing gaze. Gennady has seen that look before, motionless and cold, a look that says, if you move, you'll end up where she did. Gennady swallows the lump in his throat and grips the shovel handle tighter. "Dig," says Nevedomskiy, grabbing the second shovel. Gennady starts digging. Yuri Nevedomskiy was born in 1983 in the city of Molodechno, Minsk region, Republic of Belarus. His father died when he was a child, and little Yura was raised by his mother. Impulsive and quick-tempered, the boy had been a source of trouble for his mother since childhood. Yura didn't want to study. He fought with other kids and skipped classes. He barely graduated. After 8 grades of regular school at home in Molodechno, he was transferred to Mogilev, to a closed special school for troubled teenagers. Nevedomskiy repeatedly came to the attention of law enforcement, at first for relatively minor offenses, then for more serious ones. His first conviction was in 2001. Robbery, theft of a passport, and hooliganism. At that time, Nevedomskiy was only 17. Actually, he was 16. He was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. After 2.5 years, his sentence was changed to restriction of freedom. He served the remainder of his sentence in an open-type correctional facility in the city of Molodechno, that is, in his hometown. People who have committed crimes that do not pose a particular public danger and are less serious are sent to such a facility. Convicts can go to work, meet with their loved ones, and buy groceries for themselves at the store. The main thing is to follow the rules established by internal regulations and not break discipline. However, Nevedomskiy didn't like the discipline of the facility. He felt like a prisoner. He wanted to be free and go out with girls while he was still young. And he also missed his mother. Nevedomskiy lashed out at those around him, refused to follow the institution's rules, and finally, in early July 2003, escaped. His destination was the city of Kopil, which he reached on foot and by hitchhiking. Next, Nevedomskiy wanted to go to Minsk. On the way from the correctional facility, he managed to stop by some store and buy a drink, and now there was fire raging in his blood. The 20-year-old guy headed straight to the city bus station. Nevedomskiy held a knife in his hand. His steps were firm, and his expression was desperate. The guy entered the bus station building. There was no one in the waiting room. It was getting close to 9 p.m. and all the buses had already left. Kopil. A small town with only 10,000 people, and the bus station was often empty in the evenings. That's true. This played into Nevedomskiy's hands. No witnesses, easier to act. The female cashier, Yekaterina, it would later turn out that she was pregnant, was at her post, and Nevedomskiy went straight to her. Passing the window, he opened the door to her office. The woman didn't have time to understand anything. Nevedomskiy swung the knife and growled. "If you scream, I'll cut you." "Come on, get out, let's take a walk." Threatening the woman with a knife, Nevedomskiy forced her to leave the building. And once again, luck. The last bus was standing on the platform in front of the station, a bus with the driver inside. Nevedomskiy, not really hiding the knife, poked the woman in the back with his free hand. "Get inside." She had no choice. After getting on the bus, Nevedomskiy warned the driver that if there was any attempt to resist, he would stab the woman in the stomach with a knife. "Start the engine and go. Drive to Minsk," he demanded. "And no funny business, or I'll stab you too." The driver obeyed. The bus left the bus station and headed toward Minsk, which was just under 90 kilometers away. Nevedomskiy sat next to the hostage, pressing a knife to her side. The woman was breathing heavily from fear, but she didn't move. Nevedomskiy himself also didn't move. The fit of rage was gradually passing. The realization was growing that there was no way back, which meant he had to play for high stakes. But Nevedomskiy was too inexperienced for a crime of such scale. At around 11 p.m. near the village of Rusaki, about 80 kilometers from Minsk, he was stopped by the police. By that time, news of the hostage situation had already spread throughout the Minsk region. "Come on, stop the show." One of the officers tried to talk him down, but Nevedomskiy shouted that if he came any closer, he would stab the hostage. The officer backed off for now. Security forces were gathering around the hijacked bus. The district prosecutor also arrived. However, the criminal refused to make contact. Nevedomskiy demanded that the driver continue the route to the capital, and also demanded a meeting with his mother and a weapon. The situation was rapidly going beyond the scope of a local emergency. It was reported to the head of state. On site, headquarters of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, KGB, and the prosecutor's office were deployed. The operation was personally led by the Minister of Internal Affairs, Vladimir Naumov. In Minsk, at the Security Council, an operational group was created to monitor every move of the criminal. The escape turned into a scandal of national scale. District Prosecutor Vladimir Polishchuk gave a warning and approached the bus. "Don't come any closer, I'll stab her," Nevedomskiy barked and grabbed his victim, who was scared half to death. He was still drunk, holding the knife tightly, and wasn't backing down from his demands. "Let the woman go," the prosecutor said calmly, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "She has a family. She's expecting a child. And you don't care who you hold hostage anyway. Let me take her place." Nevedomskiy agreed after some thought. He really didn't care. The frightened woman left the bus, and the prosecutor took her place inside. But according to other sources, the prosecutor and the woman were in the bus with the criminal until the very end of the operation. In the morning, after hours of negotiations involving the minister, the head of the KGB anti-terrorist center, and the prosecutor of the Minsk region, Nevedomskiy, tired and broken by a sleepless night and alcohol, finally allowed himself to be detained. His shocked mother came to see him at the detention center. Yekaterina, who spent the night on the bus next to the armed fugitive, experienced severe stress. Paramedics took her to the hospital as soon as the criminal let her go. Physically, the woman's condition was satisfactory, but she needed help from a psychologist. A criminal case was opened against Nevedomskiy. He was taken to the Kopil District Internal Affairs Department, interrogated, and he confessed to everything. After such a crime, there could no longer be any talk of an open-type correctional facility. Nevedomskiy went to serve his first long sentence in a real colony with thick walls, barbed wire, and a regime that he definitely wouldn't be able to break. He spent 11 years and 6 months in places of detention. He spent 6 of those years in a solitary cell. After being released, Nevedomskiy moved to a new place of residence in the village of Parichani, Grodno region near Tarnova. He wanted to start over with a clean slate, to settle somewhere he wasn't known and wouldn't be judged. An elderly woman whom he helped around the house gave him a house and a plot of land as a gift. The nearest neighbors were several hundred meters away. That suited him just fine. To make a living, Nevedomskiy took seasonal construction jobs in Minsk and looked after animals temporarily. He wasn't lazy, he raised pigs and poultry so there would always be meat and eggs on the table. The local police officer said this: there were no complaints about him. He wasn't an alcoholic, didn't swear, was calm, not confrontational. He was always fixing up his house. He wanted to finish fixing it up and sell it as an estate so he could then move to the Volkovysk district. For the whole summer, almost until late autumn, Yuri would go to Minsk to work as a laborer on a construction site. He returned to the farmstead only in autumn. The neighbors considered him a quiet and humble man, however he was somewhat unsociable. In the town, which was really more of a village, only 600 people lived there and everyone knew each other. Usually in such tiny villages, people tried to stick together and help each other, but Nevedomskiy didn't let anyone get close to him. He tolerated the district police officer, who came by every month for a preventive talk, but he didn't try to make friends with him. The only exception was Gennady Grigorievich, Gennady Kudlo, a resident of the neighboring village of Masevichi. He was well over 40, he was also alone, and he didn't have a family either. And he and Nevedomskiy became friends, drank together, and sometimes invited women over to have a bit more fun. One of Nevedomskiy's good acquaintances was a woman named Svetlana. The 41-year-old woman had previously had problems with alcohol. She was even sent for compulsory treatment at a labor treatment facility, the so-called LTP. She moved to Tarnova. When she came there to earn money, she ended up staying. She got a live-in partner. She also tried to start over. The rehab didn't really help Svetlana, and from time to time she would go on long drinking binges. Almost never did the woman refuse an offer to drink. Nevedomskiy and Gennady were planning to celebrate the New Year 2020 together. They also decided to get together on Catholic Christmas, December 25th, to sit, have a drink, and enjoy good company. Svetlana was invited as the pleasant company. Nevedomskiy set the table and vodka was poured into the shot glass. The men took care of Svetlana, putting appetizers on her plate. Everyone felt at ease and only thought about good things. Svetlana was a lively woman, able to keep up a conversation and make jokes. For a while, the group was having fun. Closer to midnight, the mood suddenly changed. It's unclear what exactly triggered it, but an argument broke out between the woman and Nevedomskiy. The slightly drunk Svetlana started hurling insults. The man couldn't hold back anymore either. And then rage clouded everything, to silence her, to show who was in charge here. When Svetlana turned away, he grabbed the metal scoop he used to shovel coals into the stove and hit the woman on the head. Svetlana cried out in pain. The next blow landed on her face. This time, the woman shielded herself with her hands and then curled up in the corner of the sofa, but Nevedomskiy kept furiously hitting her. Svetlana screamed, but there was no one to hear her. The nearest house was hundreds of meters away, and the neighbors were probably celebrating the holiday too, so their houses were noisy. "What are you standing there for? Help!" he growled at Kudlo, still holding the bloodied shovel in his hand. "Give me the wire, let's strangle her." But Gennady froze in place and just silently watched what was happening. He had never seen his friend in such a rage before. Never before had Nevedomskiy's face had such a wild expression. It seemed that in another moment the shovel would be stained with Kudlo's own blood. The man was scared.
I had never seen him so furious in 4 years. I asked to call an ambulance, but he said he wouldn't go to prison again.
Nevedomskiy meanwhile pinned the still living Svetlana to the couch. "Don't just stand there, grab the wire, help me strangle her," Yuri hissed, but Gennady still couldn't move. Everything that was happening seemed unreal to him. "He's taking her life, we'll both go to jail," a desperate thought flashed through Gennady's mind. "I can't." I can't. I really can't, he barely managed to say, picking up the wire from the floor. He was trembling, she noted, from his hands to his voice. Yuri didn't waste any time. He yanked the wire from Kudlo and wrapped it around the woman's neck. A few minutes later, it was all over. When Svetlana went still, Nevedomskiy finally calmed down from his fit of rage. He started thinking pragmatically and coldly again. He needed to get rid of the body, and he already knew how to do it. We need to burn her. We'll burn the clothes too, he said coldly to Gennady. For now, let's take her out to the yard. We need to clean up the house. Gennady followed his companion obediently, like a dog on a leash following its owner. The thought of running away no longer even crossed his mind. They carried the body out of the house and left it behind the shed. Nevedomskiy said, for other matters. They both knew what those matters were. Meanwhile, Nevedomskiy burned his belongings and the couch on which he took Svetlana's life. He scattered the ashes in the field. A couple of days later, according to another version, already after New Year's, Nevedomskiy invited Gennady over again. Well, it's time to get rid of her, he said when Gennady entered the yard. Soon her relatives or someone else will start looking for her, and then we're done for. Gennady cast a sidelong glance at the sack with the body. Get rid of her? How? We'll cut it up. We'll cut off the arms, legs, and head and burn them, the clothes too. And we'll hide the torso. We'll bury it far away, they won't find it, Nevedomskiy stated calmly and reached for the axe. Gennady, who was overcome with disgust and terrible fear at the sight of Svetlana's body, frozen to the bone, backed away. I won't do it, I can't, he muttered fearfully. Clutching the axe in his hand, Yuri turned to him. His expression was icy, and Gennady felt that coldness down to his bones. You do realize you're an accomplice? Come on, just do everything the easy way. Gennady understood that if he refused, he would face the same fate as Svetlana. Nevedomskiy was younger, faster and stronger. One blow with an axe and he wouldn't be going anywhere. Gennady agreed. Together, the men skillfully got to work. While Yuri was busy with the axe, chopping off Svetlana's limbs and head, Gennady lit the stove. It was decided to start with the limbs. The frozen flesh wouldn't bend, and Nevedomskiy cursed as he shoved the corpse's legs into the stove. The men threw Svetlana's clothes into the stove. The air smelled of roasted flesh, and you could see the skin charring. Gennady felt sick and went outside. The thought of escape didn't even cross his mind anymore. He understood that there was no way back now. After the clothes burned, Yuri threw the axe he used to dismember the body into the stove. That way they got rid of the murder weapon. Yuri scattered the ashes in the field again. The decapitated, mutilated corpse spent a couple more days in a bag behind the criminal's house. No guests came to Nevedomskiy, so there was no one to notice the bag. Gennady, of course, kept silent. However, soon Yuri called him over again. We need to take the body somewhere outside the village, he said. We'll bury it deeper. Get the shovels ready, we're going tonight. Soon the two men were already walking across the frozen ground, away from Tarnova. A few kilometers from the village, at a depth of about 1 meter, they buried the body of their victim. The place in the yard where they chopped up the corpse, Nevedomskiy dug it over and covered it with bleaching powder. Now all that was left was to wait out the storm. But Nevedomskiy hoped that he would survive it. After the holidays, Svetlana's partner dropped by Nevedomskiy's house. The man was clearly worried. Svetlana supposedly said she was going to visit her parents, but the holidays were already over and she still hadn't returned. Her parents even said that they hadn't seen their daughter since December. She wasn't with you? The man asked through clenched teeth. Nevedomskiy shrugged. She was here on the 25th, but left in the morning on the 26th and never came back. She was very drunk. It turned out that Svetlana had gone missing back on the 26th, almost 2 weeks ago. Svetlana's partner went to the police. Around the same time, workers from the municipal service in Minsk, who were inspecting the Svislok River after the New Year holidays, made a horrifying discovery: a black canvas bag containing severed female limbs. The toenails were painted with red polish. The news spread throughout the region instantly. The Tarnova district police officer Vitaly Gorelkevich immediately picked up on this information. The limbs could have belonged to the missing Svetlana. It couldn't be ruled out, especially since her partner seemed to have recognized Svetlana's limbs. "She used to paint her nails red, I think," he said. "But if the hands and feet were found, then where is the body?" Just a couple of days later, while questioning the residents of Tarnov for information, Gorelkevich visited Nevedomskiy's house. He was the last one to see Svetlana, and they also dug up his criminal record. After a brief interrogation, he said that he didn't know anything about what happened to Svetlana. He told the investigators the same story, that a drunk Svetlana left him on the morning of December 26th and that he hadn't seen her since. He didn't provide any new information. Getting nothing new from Yuri, the district officer decided to back off, but he felt that something was off about the case. Together with his colleague, senior district officer Kozlovsky, he decided to check Nevedomskiy's acquaintances. Inevitably, his attention was drawn to a resident of a neighboring village, someone named Gennady. And unlike the unsociable Yuri, Gennady was talkative, chatty, and frightened. When the district officer came to Gennady, the man came out to meet him with a pale face. It was clear that something was bothering him. His eyes darted around and his hands were shaking. Gennady's colleagues at work said that all last week he had been acting like a different person. The questioning began, and at first Gennady told the district officers the same version as Nevedomskiy. On December 25th they were drinking. On December 26th she left. And then the district officers decided to show him the photos of the bag with the severed limbs inside. Gennady looked at the photos and it was like he broke down. He told the district officers everything, how they had a fight, how Yuri strangled the woman with a wire, how they dismembered her and burned the limbs. The last detail interested the investigators the most. In the bag that was found in Svislok there were female limbs, but Gennady claimed that, first of all, they had chopped the body into pieces, and secondly, they had burned the arms and legs of their victim. The method described by the suspect implied there would be a lot of blood at the crime scene, but the specialist didn't find anything right away. The second man, whom the suspect who confessed pointed to, categorically denied his involvement. He explained that he last saw the woman alive on December 25th. Taking this into account, as well as the identity of the suspect and the appearance of information about a dismembered body found in the Svislok River, we did not rule out the possibility of a false confession. Sometimes people, in order to attract attention to themselves, confess to high-profile crimes, said Viktor Legan, deputy head of the investigative committee of the Republic of Belarus for the Grodno region. But it gradually became clear that the limbs belonged to another woman. The discovery was in no way connected to the death of Svetlana. It was later revealed that at the beginning of the new year, a resident of Minsk was killed in her apartment in Minsk by a man from Central Asia. After taking the woman's life, he cut off her arms and legs and left the body in the apartment. Thus, neither Gennady nor Yuri had any connection to the limbs found in the river. The investigators began interrogating Gennady with renewed intensity, and he easily recalled the details. They were too deeply etched in his memory. At the same time, the man kept repeating that essentially he hadn't done anything, and even if he had, it wasn't of his own free will. Yurka threatened him with death if he refused. He didn't help him finish off Svetlana, but only helped get rid of the body. "But they'll lock me up anyway, I'm as good as dead," he kept repeating, completely crushed. It was decided to detain Yuri quickly and with all necessary precautions. They needed to approach the matter carefully, so as not to scare the suspect or provoke aggression. Here's what we came up with. I took the service car and together with the detective went for what was supposedly a preventive talk. It was the beginning of the month and the year, so everything was clear. Next, according to my plan, I was supposed to go into the house, say hello, then remember that I forgot the form that needed to be signed and invite him to the car. The main thing was to act like nothing was wrong, so he wouldn't suspect anything, said Gorelkevich. Nevedomskiy met the uninvited guests calmly. Vitaly Gorelkevich complained about the lack of rest during the holiday, and Nevedomskiy seemed to relax. The men walked to the house, and the district police officer asked Yuri to sign the form. When the criminal followed him to the car, the detective knocked him down and restrained him. Nevedomskiy did not resist. When they lifted him up, he kept repeating, "I have nothing to do with this, Vladimirovich, I swear." But Gorelkevich already understood that he was lying. While the main suspect was sitting in the car with the district officer and denying everything, the operations team arrived at his house. The forensic experts immediately began searching the area around and inside for traces of blood, hair, and the victim's clothing. It was immediately discovered that the ground near the shed had been recently dug up and covered with bleach. It was clear that someone had tried to cover up the evidence here and acted deliberately, as if the criminal had done something like this before. As Nevedomskiy himself later stated, this really wasn't his first time taking a life, and he knew how to cover his tracks. He told the investigators that Svetlana was his sixth victim. He didn't name any of the others. According to him, he committed those crimes out of cold calculation, proving to himself that he could easily fool law enforcement. He liked to go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs website from time to time and see that his victims were still listed as missing persons. However, when it came to the death of Svetlana, Nevedomskiy suddenly stated that this crime was completely different. It wasn't planned, he lost control during an argument. That happened to him often. "You'd better handcuff me to a chair so I can't get drunk. I might go after someone," the criminal said. "And women shouldn't come near me at all. I can't be responsible for myself." However, his claims about other victims were never confirmed. While Nevedomskiy was being interrogated, experts found the first objective evidence of his guilt. In the yard of the house, traces of blood were found on the fence, apparently splatters. The examination established that the blood belonged to Svetlana. Gennady also helped and pointed out the location of the victim's burial. That same day, an investigative team went out to the field. The ground was frozen and daylight was short, so they had to finish work early. Gennady indicated the place approximately, and the team had to spend some time searching. They searched for Svetlana's body for more than a day and a half straight. An excavator was needed to retrieve it. The dead earth is reluctant to let go of tourists. It takes what it already considers its own. After Svetlana's body was recovered and identified, the games were over for Nevedomskiy. There was no longer any point in lying or denying. Just like Gennady before him, he began cooperating with the investigation. However, unlike his unwilling accomplice, who was constantly terrified at the prospect of a life sentence or even receiving the death penalty, Nevedomskiy answered questions almost detachedly. One of his acquaintances later said that he deeply regretted not getting rid of the only witness, saying that the witness was nervous and could have revealed everything at any moment. He said that he had planned to get rid of Gennady before January 7th, and that if he had managed to do it, there was a high chance that no one would have found out anything for a very long time. Yuri himself deeply regretted that such a set of circumstances occurred, especially with the discovery in the Svislok River. If you want even more videos, go to Boosty if you're in Russia, and Patreon if you're not in Russia. There you'll find exclusive videos that aren't on YouTube. The links are below the video. Forensic experts conducted 9 examinations, more than 20 expert analyses were assigned. As a result, both men were charged under Part 2 of Article 139 of the Criminal Code of the Republic of Belarus regarding murder committed by a group of people. Nevedomskiy's past surfaced. They recalled the hostage-taking in 2003, the threat of harm to the prosecutor, and the serious bodily injuries. A seasoned criminal ended up in the defendant's seat. Gennady, however, had never been convicted until then. While the court hearings were ongoing, Yuri acted distant and withdrawn. Even a bit arrogantly, he showed no remorse at all. In court, he tried to shift part of the blame onto Gennady, claiming that he did help him kill the woman. However, the evidence collected by the investigation made it possible to confidently state that he was lying. Kudlo himself appeared in court as a victim along with Svetlana's two sisters, Larisa and Jana. Half an hour after the start of the session, one of Svetlana's sisters and Gennady started to feel unwell. The man's hands were shaking badly and the woman fainted. Both explained that it was hard for them even to see the defendant. They can't help but remember what he did to Svetlana. In general, Svetlana is a tragic figure, a woman who tried to start her life over but couldn't cope with her problems. Her vulnerability showed in her problems with alcohol and the lack of stability in her life. At the same time, she was sociable and lively, able to keep a conversation going and create a cheerful atmosphere, which attracted people to her. Her impulsiveness, which showed in her sudden shift from fun to insults during an argument, proved fatal for her and became the trigger for Nevedomskiy's aggression. Gennady Kudlo appears as a weak, easily led, and easily influenced person. His actions were driven not by malice, but by an almost animal fear and instinct for survival. He was pliable and fell under the strong influence of his more charismatic and aggressive friend. At the crucial moment of taking a life, he was paralyzed by passivity and cowardice. He could neither help nor interfere, frozen in terror. He felt intense guilt and remorse. His psyche could not withstand what he had done, which showed in his trembling paleness and ultimately in his full confession. He was deeply aware of his role as an accomplice, and his main all-consuming fear was the inevitable punishment. Yuri Nevedomskiy is the central and darkest figure. His psychological profile is that of a cold, calculating person with pronounced antisocial traits. He is prone to outbursts of unprovoked rage, which led to Svetlana's death during a quarrel that was not initially planned. However, this impulsiveness was combined in him with an ability for cold pragmatism. Immediately after taking her life, he instantly switched to planning how to cover up the traces. He organized the dismemberment, burning, and burial of the body. He was extremely manipulative and sought dominance, as seen in how he completely controlled Gennady through fear and threats. In court, he showed no remorse, acted detached and arrogant, and tried to shift the blame onto his accomplice. His pathological dishonesty and claims about other victims, even those that were not confirmed, demonstrated his desire to appear more significant and dangerous. The only thing he truly regretted was not having managed to eliminate the witness, Gennady, his friend. The story of Nevedomskiy and Kudlo is a classic example of the strong-weak duo dynamic, with a dominant psychopath and a compliant, weak-willed person, where the former used the latter as a tool and later as a scapegoat. The role of chance was also crucial. The discovery of limbs in the Svislok River, unrelated to this case, created additional psychological pressure for Gennady and sped up the solving of the crime. As for the system and society, this story demonstrates how a person with criminal tendencies from prison can outwardly adapt, gain a reputation as quiet and calm, but regardless, the internal mechanisms of aggression and norm violations do not disappear. The vigilance of the district police officer and the work of the investigation ultimately broke this cycle. Overall, this is a story about how the intertwining of one person's pathological psychology, another's weakness, and the tragic circumstances in the life of a third led to a brutal crime. The trial of Yuri Nevedomskiy became one of the most high-profile cases in Belarus in recent years. The man was predictably found guilty, there was plenty of evidence, and the court sentenced him to life imprisonment to be served in a high-security correctional facility. He is still there now. Gennady received no sentence, and Svetlana was buried in a closed coffin in her native Stalinsky district.